My name is Kenneth. I use he, him pronouns, and I am the curator and host of Poetry at the Point. I almost said Poetry at the Point online. We are not online tonight. We are actually at the focal point for the first time since before the pandemic. So I'm really excited. Yes, you can clap for that. I'm really excited to be in a room with other three-dimensional human beings with physical bodies. It's pretty amazing. So again, good evening. Welcome to our last Poetry at the Point of this year. This is a monthly reading series, which you know is organized by the St. Louis Poetry Center. I'm super excited to be with you this evening with a slightly different agenda than what you may be used to. I have the pleasure and thrill of having gathered my most favorite poet colleagues with me, with whom I've been in a group. I almost said workshopping. We're gonna break down what that even means. We're gonna deconstruct a little bit. Poems for a couple of years now. They've been doing so prior to my arrival, usually under the moniker TikTok poets. And we had a bit of a laugh earlier because we have someone serving with us as an intern who is an undergraduate at St. Louis University who was certain that we were TikTok poets because we are super digitally advanced and do all of our poetry on social media, especially TikTok. There's a C in both Tick and Tock because of the TikTok Tavern in South St. Louis City, where we gathered in the before times, especially so. So before we get started, and before I introduce the first poet who's going to read for us, I want to mention a few quick announcements. One is that, well, first of all, thank you so much to the Focal Point. It's really lovely to be back here. They're always so generous and so such a lovely host to us. So thanks for having us. Logistics, yay! Yes, Focal Point. They still exist. Bathrooms are through that door and to the left. There are some that are gendered, some that are not. If you go out that door and to the right, you will go into Casa Maya. There is not a particular bar type spot, but you can order a drink and they allow us to bring it in here, trusting that you will, of course, if you have glassware, take it back when you're done. So please enjoy that. I have been told, and I'm super excited, that there is t-shirts, more than t-shirts, merchandise of some description available starting on December 1st with the St. Louis Poetry Center logo on it, so you can support the Poetry Center that way. I'm super pumped for my t-shirt. I also want to just thank you for being so patient with us as we have weathered this pandemic and what that means for doing virtual readings versus in-person readings versus tonight where we're actually in person but also live streaming. So just thanks for your patience and thanks for bearing with us. I'm really glad that you showed up tonight. I want to mention a couple things coming up. Observable readings. The next observable is not till March of next year. It is going to be part of a long weekend of events. So on the 4th of March, there will be an art opening. On the 5th, there will be a panel. On the 6th, there will be a workshop with Mark Wunderlich. And then on the 7th will be a reading with both Mark Wunderlich and Mary Ruffle. Attendance options, I assume that will also be live streamed so that to be as accessible as possible for that. Similar to this evening, if you attend any of those events, either make sure you have your vaccination card, a photo of it, or a negative COVID test, bring your mask, all that good stuff. You can always become a member of the St. Louis Poetry Center. We opted not to do that physically tonight, so do that on our website, stlouispoetrycenter.org. Always thank you to the Missouri Arts Council and to the generous support of members like yourself and myself who support this series every single year. So we're going to move on to this discussion. I want to preface this by saying that we're going to save time at the end for lots of questions and lots of responses. I don't want to say answers, questions and responses to those questions this evening. We have a few that we've talked about that we want to get to, but also we want to honor the questions that pop into your brain as we move along the reading tonight. So please think of those because we want you to be involved in this discussion at the end too. Okay? Cool? You ready for some poetry?
Yeah.
Sweet. TikTok poets. So I hope I didn't kind of force the issue by saying that we are like a collective, but it's a lot more hip to call us a collective than it is anything else. yonder 2 years ago now, I sent an email to Aaron Quick, the executive director of St. Louis Poetry Center, and said, I'm in this group where we talk about our poetry and try to make our poetry better, and it's just not quite a fit for me. Do you have a group of folks that you know who might be? And she said, yeah, there's this group. And I was like, yeah, all those people are actually really legit poets, and that's intimidating as hell to me. And she said, no, you should definitely come. And so I found myself in the company of these fantastic poets, talking about poetry, workshopping poetry, just in a more authentic way than I had experienced it before. So I thought it might be fun at the end of the year, instead of just featuring a couple or three poets, to actually have more of a group nature to the discussion. So I would invite any of us, as we move into the question and answer session, to provide some more context of the history of the group that I'm familiar with. But without further ado, I want to introduce Mr. Stephen Schroeder. Stephen Schroeder's third book, Wikipedia Apocalyptica, is forthcoming from Swallowtail Press. His second book, The Royal Nonesuch, from Sparkwheel, won the Devil's Kitchen Reading Award from Southern Illinois University. He edits, excuse me, throat's getting dry, I need some more bourbon. He edits the online journal, $? Okay, sure. Poetry's Currency. He works as a creative content manager for a financial marketing agency in St. Louis. And as we go along, each of us who are introducing the next poet has requested one particular poem of that poet. And they're only going to read a couple poems, 3 poems or so a piece. The poem that I requested is one called This Miniature City Goes on Its Own. And that's because at the time when Stephen was working on poems that I believe were kind of sister poems to this one, I was trying to do something very similar. They all had this kind of like mystical, out of time, out of place, kind of fable vibe to them. And I was trying to be diligent about keeping a dream journal and kind of crafting some poems from that. So they're weird in all the most beautiful, wonderful ways. And so that's one poem that I've asked Stephen to read tonight. So, Stephen, take it away.
Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm going to start by reading the poem that Kenneth just mentioned. This Miniature City Goes on Its Own. And as he alluded to, this is from a series I was working on, have been working on. That's all fables, fairy tales, fantasies, that sort of thing. This miniature city goes on its own. See the city within the city, say the handbills. Mechanical marvel, world wonder. Gold scrollwork swirls on the great wayfarer's gate, open for absent passers-by. Driverless carriages navigate avenues between shrines and libraries and arboretums. In the empty market square, warm bread and vendor cries float on breeze from nowhere. All that and more promise handbills flattened into potholes and overflowing gutters. No mention of the rasp and rattle from a traveler who arrives with coffin fever. Not the scarlet spots alight in matching patterns where the body and the city burn. Never the scavengers in ever closer circles. This miniature city goes on alone. The model of the model room lifts its roof to memories of guards who can't scratch the feeling of being watched. Inside the model, within the city, within the city, within the city. Legend holds that any who pry the lid up with a thumbnail find eternity, or whirring gears, or nothing. Above, a city building goddess, eyes like skylights, stretches down past do not touch signs as if to try. All right, and the second poem I'm going to read, I chose to read because we're sort of talking about the interplay of us being a poetry group and how our writing affects the others. And this one is very direct. The title of this poem, well, the whole spark for this poem came from Lizzy Petersen, who wrote a poem. The title and concept was Vacat, which is an intentionally blank space or blank page you'll see sometimes in books or other sorts of printed materials. And because she was thinking of that concept and writing about that concept, I thought about what an interesting concept it is to see a page that says this space intentionally left blank, and what that might mean, and different kinds of sort of paradoxical seeming instructions or notes like that. So this poem is called Please Write Below This Line. This space intentionally left blank in case of your personal emergency for internal or external use only as a flotation device that fits at least 2.5 intriguing facts, an origin myth with teeth plus a lightning strike. Break the glass, enter the pen, feed your animals after dusk and see what happens. These timber wolves live in the house you lived in long ago. They love you as much as your mother does. Follow the trail that follows water down from stone-cut heights, past this pinpoint, beyond sense, into again. Search for a word for what there is no word for, and then. All right, and the last poem I'm going to read tonight, Kenneth also mentioned in his intro that I have a book coming out. It's called Wikipedia Apocalyptica, and it's going to come out January, February, I believe. Hopefully you'll remember in a couple months, but I know that's not how it works, but I have terrible timing. But I am going to read one poem from that book. This is it's called Endnotes, and it is the actual endnotes of the book. Endnotes. This book needs no introduction. Don't you know who this book is? This book was decided by a single vote. This book is everybody's favorite. Children and adults alike will love this book. Love this book or leave it. This book must be seen to be believed. This book as seen on TV. This book is better than the movie. This book has a great idea for a book. This book is too good to be true. This book is proudly made in America. American history is made up of this book. This book is made up. This book is a trade secret. This book slathers. This book upsizes and upsells. Buying this book earns triple reward points. This book has an optional vacuum attachment. This book collects military hardware. There's no quit in this book. This book gives 110% effort. This book trusts its gut above statistics. This book played offensive line in high school. This book rubs dirt on its injuries. This book sweats the weakness out. A glacier is on this book's bucket list. This book eats what it kills. This book won't shit where it eats. This book wants a steak well done or bloody. This book wants to speak to the manager. Talking money in this book is taboo. This book aspires to be a billionaire. Millennials are killing this book. Why bring politics into this book? This book doesn't perceive color. This book has black friends. With all due respect, this book, well, actually, this book is what she said. This book buries its heartache far inside. This book hears your disrespect behind its back. This book is always on. This book isn't over when it's over. Please obey this book's instructions. Avoid sudden loud noises near this book. Maintain a straight sightline to this book. Do not put this book in your eyes. Do not overfeed this book. Do not operate this book while intoxicated. This book is a choking hazard. This book is a leading cause of accidental pregnancy. Symptoms of this book include nausea and anxiety. There is no known cure for this book. Thank you. Ran out of breath there at the end. All right, and now as we move on, I am going to be introducing Allison Cundiff, who is 2 seats to my left here. Allison's publications include 3 books of poetry: Just to See How It Feels, 2018, Word Press; Otherings, 2016, Golden Antelope Press; and in short, A Memory of the Other on a Good Day, co-authored with Stephen Schreiner, 2014, also Golden Antelope Press. Her nonfiction is featured in The Pragmatic Buddhist, St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Feminist Teacher, and in layman's terms Literary Journal. Her fiction can be found at Hot Flash Fiction. Her poetry is featured in the Cheriton Review, Little Paddington Review, The Night Heron Barks, Swim, The Antonym, Oxmag, and Let's Stab Caesar. She lives in St. Louis, where she teaches English. And the poem that I requested she read is called Fig Tree. I chose it because I think that it does a great job of combining her fantastic ability to tell a story, set a scene, and with a really compelling sort of compact strangeness that I enjoyed a great deal. And I'm also interested because I believe she said she revised it and published it since we saw it as a group, so I'm very excited to see what it's like now. Please welcome Allison.
I think we'll get to this in our small group later, but one of the best parts of this group is that we rework our pieces so that there are pieces I send out, and I don't know if I feel comfortable sending them out if I don't show them to these people first. So we'll get back to that, but this is a deviation for me because I'm usually like, oh, here's the story of my life, and it's long and difficult. And I was kind of inspired by the brevity of my colleagues here, and try to keep it short and try to keep it tight. So this is a poem about getting stung by a wasp. I'm a beekeeper, so like that's irony. But the wasp stings are totally different than bee stings. So bees are cool. You want to just like let them be in your house, but wasps, it's cool to run. And when I was little, I remember my first sting experience was this. So this is called Fig Tree. I saw the wasp's narrow waist, ladylike, I thought, her lifting shadow dart across the water before I felt the aching sting. And on the slouching dock, my mother, fast, pulled a fig from the brown turkey tree. Her teeth bit white through the fruit, and holding my wrist firmly, she plucked the stinger from the spreading pink and pressed the wet fruit to the spot, saying, shh, the fig needs the wasp to bring her lover to her. Inside the fruit, I saw bodies pressed together in my mind, secret limbs, a cool brown thorax. She was saying, shh, the wasp has her own daughters, too. So the other two pieces I'm going to read, one's another short one, which is work for me. And this one's about having a baby and not having the baby to nurse. And it is called Her Milk Came In. Her milk came in. Her milk came in 2 days after it was over. Pools of it every time she lifted her arms. Rosemary, nearly deaf, drove over, a canvas bag on her shoulder, with iceberg lettuce frozen into cups to slip into the girl's bra. It's what they all had used back when. The frozen sea green leaves wilted slowly against her swollen breasts. And so the last piece is more my typical shtick. It's a longer piece, and it is, so I have two brothers. I have a nice one and a mean one. Those of you with two brothers get it. And so this is about the mean one. And so there were games when my mom went to work, and this was one about what happened when my dad was in charge, and I was left with my two brothers. One was too bored to interact, and one, I think I had finally gotten to the age where I was old enough to sort of troll him a smidge. And so one day I got away. And that's what this poem is about. It's about my neighbor who was a bird watcher, and he had this camera. It was like one of those big, really big ones that just took energy. And he actually got a picture of me escaping my brother, which is like the great triumph of my life, my pre-adolescent life. So this is called Snapshot. This is for you, Timmy. Okay. Snapshot. And the snapshot I'm for, I think, standing bent, hands on my knees, I just raced my brother, the mean one, who wouldn't let me pet my dog, one last time before my father put her down. My mother wasn't home. She worked nights at a bookstore called B. Dalton. The sign was in a cursive font. I was just learning to read, thinking, oh, that B makes the B sound. She'd stand there in her brown hair and her brown eyes and move books around and sit behind a tall counter shared by a few workers. A young girl who chewed gum with her mouth open. A man with a beard and a heavy part who was gentle with my mother. Left to forage for my own dinner, I kicked my brother in his white shin, and he reached to grab me. The comic clenched in his other hand, but I was smaller, and I slipped between his legs, racing, his breath behind me. Out the door, jumping over the lawnmower my father hovered over, circling the house, the dogs barking in chase, and ending in Natalie Scottiman's yard, where her father, an amateur bird watcher, outside with his camera, looked up. I threw my body up onto the jungle gym, where Natalie waited with her brother Stephen, their hands full of rocks, to pelt at Timmy if he came any closer. He backed away, his finger pointing at me in his defeat. My breath heaved back into my chest. I'll get you, he said, and her father snapped the picture. So I have the honor of introducing Steph Russell to my left here. Steph, I'm gonna read her bio and we'll hear some poems from her. Steph Russell is the author of Inferna in Tagliata Press 2013, The Possum Codex, Autumn Nebula 2015, and 47 incantatory essays from Starton Press 2019. She's also the 2018 Lawmeyer Sculpture Park Poet in Residence. Find her online at stephrussell.com, Twitter at Volturine, and Instagram at Stefene7. So, Steph, I have to say, anybody who's been in St. Louis for a minute has admired her work for so long. When I joined this group, I remember thinking, I was reading it, and here you are. So we actually just swapped books at our last meeting, and I was so taken by a collection of and they're available for sale in the back, both a collection of poems and then prose pieces. And I actually chose a piece that I just want to introduce it by saying that it's how I felt I saw things when I was little before I had the words to say them. So I'm going to let Steph introduce the piece with her own perfect language. Steph Russell, everybody.
Okay, I have a challenge for everybody though. Okay, you notice everybody else's bottle of nice liquor is like empty. Yeah, so I have this stuff called Jepson's Malort that I bought in Sweet Town in Chicago in 2019, and it has been sitting under my kitchen counter since then. We cracked it open tonight, and it's got an extremely unique taste, kind of like some kerosene that's had a piece of coal marinating in it for a while. And anyone who comes up and takes a shot of this and doesn't cry, I will give you a free book. This is the book, the one with boobs on it. All right, okay, Steve's up for the challenge. Okay, come here, Steve. All right, cheer him on.
Chug. All
right. Red's gonna take another one. All right, he already got. He's just doing this for fun. All right, we have.
This is highbrow literature, ladies and gentlemen. And non-binary individuals.
You gotta scream and never how you can do this. All right. We got a true carpenter up for the challenge. All right, one more. Two more. Oh, yes. This cups right here. That's all like firecracker. Not only will I not have to take this bottle with me, I will have to take my boxes with me. All right, anybody? All right, down the hatch. 1, 2, 3. I don't see anyone crying, so come see me later for a book. Give it time. Oh, that's right. Okay. Well, someone else is gonna have to keep an eye for me because I'll be reading. So if you see tears flowing. Okay, so this little book, Inferna, yeah, I did have to send my mom a copy, boobs all over it and everything, but this is, so it's really super structured. It's kind of based on the structure of Dante's Inferno. So this is one for the back. It's called Keyhole, Tune of Lilac. The watcher turned her face into the dark with a werewolf's eye for splendor, and what was there to find? High on trapped gaslight caught in trees, high on a kind of phosphorescence, white, purple, pink, a vision of striated lives gone unstrung, foxholes, teacups hung on hooks, shampoo sets, and conversation pits, little lavender-colored mints sitting in a dish for 20 years, purple glass grapes strung together with rusting wires. What use do you have for your hands, man? What use do you have for your hands, woman? Why no more nosegays, no more wreaths woven from backyard flowers? Why no more books of petals, no more drunken tulips hanging after rain? Fear carried close, a dried mouse heart hidden in the chamber of a poisoner's ring. These flowers trembled after sundown, white lilacs visible after dark. This is in little golden books where the chime would sound and you would. Little boys riding bikes past curfew and hanging from clothesline poles in the bruisey dark, knowing the good of their not knowing. Decades from now, as men, they'll notice the ticklish perfume from yards away, like a song they can't remember the words to or the way it ends. So, hey, nobody's crying. That's great. Very brave people. I'm so clumsy, and I also had 2 sips of New York, so I'm like, I'm kind of a lightweight. Okay. So in honor of the Malort, I picked out a Chicago poem. Picture a milkman, and I bet you see a tubby guy in a blue zip-up jacket and a tweed little hat to match. You see a man who wears a cap because he's a little thin on top and he wears a jacket to match, not just to look official, but because he can zip it up. Picture a milkman and you picture a man in sensible shoes. A guy whose face has gone a little soft from curds and whey. But in 1931, it was a year marked by the dumping of milk trucks, shooting from ambush, burning of cow barns, and intimidation of anonymous threats. The local press described it as bitter milk war, so much crying over spilt milk. Close to guerrilla warfare, they said, like on a hot day in August when masked men hijacked an Effingham dairy farmer, pointed their guns and ordered him to empty the tank. 2 nights later, a band of 40 masked men held up a milk tank trunk from a rival dairy, not only dumping the milk but burning the truck. What was a milkman to do but wear high black boots and fill his thermos with whiskey and tuck a knife or a gun into his waistband? What was a milkman to do but spend nights in his basement doing pull-ups, thinking of himself as a milk soldier? What was a milkman to do but father children all across the city during the milk wars? And what was a milkman to do but keep driving his circuit, dropping glass bottles of whole milk on porches for all of his sons and daughters? So I'm super excited to. So Lizzy and I drove down to Arkansas together. And talked archives and stuff. And I've been watching this book that she's going to read from come together. It's just very amazing. I couldn't believe I was reading the whole thing. It was like, we called it the whole fucking thing. Sorry, I hope nobody's offended by cussing, but that whole effing thing. Lizzy Petersen is a poet from St. Louis, Missouri, where she works in public media and directs a student-run after-school literary magazine outside litmag.com through a partnership with St. Louis Public Schools. Her poetry has recently appeared in, or is forthcoming in December, Image, Ninth Letter, Pinch, and Southern Humanities Review, among others. In 2021, she was awarded the Mid-America Arts Alliance's Interchange Fellowship and the Kranzberg Arts Foundation's residency. That's breaking news. That's really cool. I think a round of applause for that. She currently serves as a contributing editor for $, Poetry is Currency. Yep. And has previously served as the managing editor of River Styx and co-poetry editor for Sycamore Review at Purdue University, where she received her MFA in poetry. And actually, I picked 3. I don't know which one you brought. I couldn't pick one. Good. Okay. I couldn't pick one. I picked 3, and I'll let her introduce those because this manuscript, we've all been watching it come together, is like so exciting. And she works from archives, and it's just I don't want to give too much away. I want Lizzy to.
I got here late, and so I had to be in the middle, which is super awkward that you guys all did that to me. But yeah, I sat and I drove Steph and I to, what was it, Little Rock area or whatever for the CD Wright conference, and made her listen to so much of the Lore podcast. And I was like, do you want to listen to another one? Because even though I don't believe in ghosts really, I just like to listen to ghost stories. So maybe that is a nice lead-in. So these poems are coming from a larger book about this photographer from a small town outside of Little Rock, Heber Springs, Arkansas, and he was a penny portrait photographer for 40 years. He didn't really leave, though I do have some evidence that he came to St. Louis and he would buy his glass plates and his juices, whatever, here, and then bring them back. And but yeah, he was a drinker in a dry town, I don't know. And a lot of people say that he's a recluse because we really like that narrative about artists and writers, but I don't think he was. I just think he was kind of curmudgeonly, but he was still be drinking outside, or he took pictures of people all day, or he played violin, I believe. Anyway, okay. So these are the first poem is in the voice of Mike Disfarmer, and this is about back in the day, not I was alive or anything, but you would order everything from the Sears catalog, and it was very liberating, especially for small town America, but also if you go into South City, half those houses are built off of the Sears catalog or whatever. People would order their homes in pieces, but anyway. So he bought a radio, and he was the first person in his town to have a radio that he put together by himself. So that's what this poem's about. Mail offers what Cleburne can't. In this case, a radio kit, some no money down, which I set on the porch to retch the weather out the front while Mother prepared the sausage in back. Her hands stuffing the tubes, their shape oddly like the vacuums inside this box. You could very well think I was showing off, and you'd be part right. Clever for figuring out the antenna and the wiring, but I prefer to think I shared some kindness, only a tear of menace. The radio brings that out of people. The preachers come out the clearest while the weather just squeaks by, their second coming and their passion play. When they're not telling me to save my money prosperously, they are making sure I renounce it, give the impression we got houses to spare. They'd have you think we like the suffering, have us clinging closer to the cloth. I'm not looking for help. Storm cellar is about all the God I trust. I just imagined he was an atheist, but maybe he's not. I know he didn't really go to church. Yeah, but also, like we're in Tornado Alley, that fear of like weather, it's pretty strong. And also in Arkansas, they don't really believe in basements. So I'm like, what y'all do? Like, they have the storm cellar situation, but even some like you go to like the burbs or whatever, and I'm like, where y'all hide out? They're like, oh, we go to the church. I'm like, what? Y'all go run down the street? What? Anyway. Because I think we all probably have stories in here of like standing out on your porch and watching storms come by because we're way too used to them. Like in normal places, we'd be like, go inside. You're like, it's not green enough. All right. So this next poem is about Bess Utley, to which it was his assistant. And essentially he was just kind of like bored one day and she was in there and he was like, you want to work for me? And she was like, yeah, I got to pay for my kid to go to school. And so then she like worked for him for like 20 years. Helping him develop photos. But I also imagine that he didn't really like to talk to people that much. Like apparently he wouldn't say anything while he was taking these pictures of people, unless they were like in bad light. He'd just be quiet. He didn't pose anybody, so all the pictures, like there's plenty of like toddlers just like, which I love so much. But anyway, so I sort of invented her as this like other perspective to kind of like look at the town and look at him. And so this is called Bess Utley Writes a Book Report on Arkansas. Story goes, a foreigner from Sweden or somewhere came way back whenever to visit the governor, only to hear he was out chasing down somebody's sow that broke loose. You're meant to see just how we take care of our kind. I like to think that there was a time sturdy enough to lean on, regularly mended, whitewashed. But I remember reading an old headlight from 1932 that told of a man shot clear in the face, robbed roadside just like they do now. Like a boar hog, gutted in a rut or a wood shelter, mostly moss now. You're meant to say you've seen enough to know what of it. On Saturdays in Shiloh, the city was made rough by all the men coming in with corn to mill and horse to shod, one thing leading to another. Before the Greer's Ferry Dam swept the town under, Shiloh had 4 murders. Frank Ramsey killed Tom Hooten, a Garrett killed a Gresham, Taylor Rammer killed Tom Williams, and 1 other killing. You're meant to feel uneasy, except all places are rough places. So, I mean, that's like me being like, everybody talks shit on St. Louis, but like, people get murdered everywhere, Like, leave it alone. That's terrible. And then the last poem is like sort of in my voice because I have like a phobia of writing in my voice. I don't really like it. But I realized that it required some honesty or something. I don't know. And I also felt a push from, especially I would say Allison being so vulnerable in her poems. Like I am in the way that like you don't know that a lot of these things are like weird stories my mom told me from growing up and da-da-da-da-da. But this one is like sort of in my voice. It's called Introduce a Catfish. Introduce a catfish to a pond and watch it settle the new territory, bloat to fill the trench, skim the floor with its mouth like a child looking up to the Lord. Watch how all matter of critter up and vanish until the pond is cleaned of life. Catfish have been known to barb the foot of ducklings, pull the bird to the bottom, gulp it down, feather and beak, honest to God, because the next weekend a couple of boys will go after it, lure the fish from its hole with the meat of their fists. Because y'all know about, what's it called again? I was like, it's not gigging.
Noodling.
Noodling. Yeah, this is me like doing the pancake. If you remember that dance, right? But like, it's they go back and forth about whether or not like they're like gonna outlaw it because it's like terrible for the ecosystem. But obviously, people love to catch fish with their whole arm. So what you gonna do? Okay, so that's like a whatever a taste of my little boo. I'm okay, I got organized and I'm no longer organized. Oh crap. I'm sorry, Kenneth. Oh no.
It's funny how this farmer always had that vertical line in his photographs.
Yeah. Do people know his photos?
Oh yeah.
Just talk? Yeah.
There's a documentary.
Yeah. No, I know. And then I got like deep into like that community and I had to pull myself out of it.
His photos are worth a lot now because he got famous.
Yeah, except not also, right? I could talk about it for a long time because I got deep into this community, and then there was a whole period where like nobody could like use the photos for a while because this one art gallery had claimed that they were the definitive archive, right? Even though, like, no, you can, but apparently you can just call yourself an archive and you are the definitive archive. There's not really like a lot of rules about it, and also of course like these art galleries were like, she's the next Diane Arbus, right? Or like Vivian Mayer. But like that Vivian Mayer documentary made like a ton of money, but like nobody's made a ton of money off of this farmer except these art galleries, right? But still they're like, here, you can buy a print that we've like printed, like made a separate copy that's like high quality for $2,000. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. I mean, I like, I'll support art, but goddamn, Anyway, I'm not like Mike made any money. Or anybody in that damn town.
No.
Anyway, okay.
Not in the hollers either.
Let's talk. Yeah, I'll talk to you later. I could go deep into it. But there was a while where everybody was like, don't talk about it, because then your family will come after you. But the family like didn't do shit. Yeah, anyway. Yeah. I had a moment where I was like, I need to get lawyers. I don't want to get sued. But now I think I'm good. But of course, this will go on the internet, so who knows? Okay, I found. Thank you for that.
Sorry.
Fine. So I think what's like interesting a little bit about this group that we can like get into. But I would say that, for instance, like my poetry, I do have like maybe like half a chat book that's like very much covers in like the Steve world, and then I have these poems that like cover in that world. And then in the like Stefene and Allison world of like the narrative and the research, which I never thought I would go into. And then what's been awesome about writing and sharing poems with Kenneth is that both of us were like, fuck punctuation, in a pretty hard way. And I think especially when you're like this is gross, but like in an MFA situation where people are like, this is the right way to write a poem. And not that it's always like that, but definitely there's that school that's like, how dare you, We've all taken classes from these people, I believe. And so it takes a long time to like deprogram yourself. And so we were both like teaching ourselves how to write poems together without punctuation. So he shared two. Which one do you think you're going for? Are you doing whales or are you doing?
You tell me.
God damn it. All right, I want the lament to a bowhead whale because it went real skinny lines. And my poems did that around the same time, and we both were like going back and forth about it. So I feel like these poems like taught me how to do it. And anyway, so that's my vibe. All right, I'm gonna put this down.
Awesome, cool. Well, I'm gonna close this out by reading a couple of poems, and then we'll open it up to y'all for some conversation. That's okay. They all know who I am. My name's Kenneth. So the poem that Lizzy is referencing is called Lament to a Bowhead Whale. And I remember for a long time being like mildly ashamed that I used like these just kind of online prompts, like poetry writing prompts. Because I'm that person who sits down and is like horrified at the blank page. And like 10 minutes later, I feel like I had a million things to say and nothing really seemed meaningful. Come to find out that that's how your brain works, right? You spawn creativity from taking something and then adding your own. So all that to say, this is from a prompt on from poetsandwriters.pw.org. It was Poets and Writers magazine has a 2, maybe 3 times weekly prompt now. One is for poetry, one is for nonfiction, one is for fiction. And this one was about particularly writing about climate change, which nothing horrifies me more than climate change. And I'm really proud of this poem in particular because it was the first poem that got picked up by like one of my favorite magazines, which is December. They're local. So anyway, it also has very short lines and no punctuation per Lizzy's request. Lament to a bowhead whale. I want to know about the shape of pain if the color changes tone over 200 years. Do the colors of our boats seem, washed in metal, uniform, more safe now? Does a full, busy harbor pull you in to explore, or was that something spent in youth 150 years ago when we were destroying each other up close more often? What water does old pain simmer now? Lost my place. Regret folds us in fin to tail. You are no longer hunted widely by us. Our experts rank you of least concern, meaning we will look away, meaning they will kill you, no regrets. And I will let them. My kid needs to get to daycare, and I have a flat tire. I will swim in the silence your ocean paths made in their wake. I would love you to sing us a quiet song. I'll read two more. So one is, I have to thank Allison for this one because I feel like when I started trying to write poetry consistently and earnestly, like late high school and then into college, like a lot of folks, I immediately jumped into this kind of like really just loose, free versey, very narrative about my feelings style, and like, you know, it suited me. And then at some point that kind of got like programmed out of me, right? And you know, I'm almost 45 years old and I'm rediscovering the pleasure of kind of writing that way, right? And not feeling like it's somehow a lesser form of poetry. And that I'm realizing this like preface almost sounds like I'm insulting the way that Allison writes. And that's not true at all. She's very much dedicated to the story that the poem is telling, and in a way that is really authentic. And I really respect that a lot. So I don't know if y'all are familiar with Phoebe Bridgers, but if you're not, you're living your life wrong. She put out a record last spring, right as the pandemic hit, called Punisher. It was nominated for several Grammys, and it is the soundtrack of this pandemic for me. So early this year, she performed on Saturday Night Live and smashed her guitar at the end. And there was this really silly thing that happened on social media where people were critiquing the hell out of it. A lot of it was absolutely sexist, but I was really, really taken by this performance, and so I wrote about it. So this is Ode to Phoebe Bridgers' performance on SNL, featuring Borges. The facial expression version of a deadpan tweet with no caps or punctuation combined with a grin that I can't tell if it's ironic while performing the whole song was how I knew it was coming. The record, my "this is one of the only days of the week when I can be certain what day of the week it is" record, skips a bit during Halloween and loops a spooky backwards sound I imagine sampling for a song I'll never write, so I return to laptop groceries, imagining the skip as an LF, as in the LF, where a dot in space-time holds everything else inside of it, and perhaps I have one on my turntable on my IKEA bookcase, is what I'm saying. Once I pulled up Punisher on my phone in the car to drive and feel sad, and saw a new Christmas EP with updated lyrics for Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. And God damn it, it was all next year, all our troubles will be out of sight. Next year, all our troubles will be miles away. But next year is already here, and all my troubles are in my mouth when I try to sing along to sad music because we're still in the middle of all this. But the moment in I Know the End where she actually did scream like on the recording and real life speed looked like slow motion the way Borges might imagine what it feels like bumping into an Aleph, she broke her aloof chic and seemed really angry. And I felt angry. And she calmly smashed her guitar, the momentum of her swings coming from the center of her body, so slowly despite the violence as I lay on the rug in my living room instead of the couch for no specific reason. The last one I'll read is super duper short, and it leads into the first question that I'm going to pose to Lizzy. So get ready for that. This is a super short poem called To the Fireflies Covering a Hillside in Rural Kentucky. I know you know, I've come here so late. We burn our own way home. Look, in the light barely left, at the yellow path, like a dry creek, mowed for me. Look at the grass, at you, at the hill, all with names, all getting to be alive. So when I brought this poem to the group, and I've never told you this, by the way, I'm gonna embarrass you in front of everybody. I remember reading, one of the comments she had on the poem was like, this seems to kind of dance the line between irony and sincerity. And I remember in my head thinking, well, shit, like I meant it really sincere. Like I meant it, like I'm feeling all these feels when I wrote this poem. And it was interesting to me that like taking something like that has a lot of, for me as the poet, had emotional depth that in our culture can be received as potentially ironic. I think kind of speaks to just our cultural moment in a lot of ways. Those of you old enough to remember after 9/11, there was all this like, oh, it's the death of irony. Everything is going to be serious from here on out. And we know that's not the case. But Stephen, I think, plays a lot with that line too, that kind of balance between irony and sincerity. So I'm wondering if either of you want to bite on that first and just speak about what does it look like to straddle that line between irony and sincerity? Does that matter, or is that up to the reader once it's kind of put out into the world?
All right, so I think in my poems I try to have the line-to-line content be fairly, plenty of irony, humorous in general, or at least fun or enjoyable or something like that. One of my poet friends said that a lot of my poems make people laugh and then drop a hammer on them, and that's the sincerity part of it. It just, my poetry goes to dark places, and I mean it. That's the irony-sincerity balance for me.
I was just gonna add that like sometimes it's like the only way that you can say something, or that there's like a certain psychology in having to make a joke about something or talk about it indirectly to speak to it. Like I remember having a friend who had to like write very, very coded, layered poems for a long time because she was talking about abuse, and there was but she couldn't do it head on. And I've see myself doing that in different ways, like I do it with persona or whatever, but then when I can inhabit somebody else's voice, and like for Bess Utley, that she can just like be talking shit on everybody, right? Or like, you think you know what it is, but like, let me tell you, like I love that like badass kind of position for her. So if she could like tell you what's up, make fun of you, and then like give you some real truth at the same time, it's also like a palatable way for people to receive information. I don't know. So that's how I think that it happens. I don't know.
That's fair.
Contributions
You hand me that.
to the chorus.
Do y'all want to bite on that too?
Oh, that's good. This feels real funky.
So I want to take it back one step and kind of ask a bit more of a macro question that we kind of, all of us danced at a little bit when we were kind of introducing each other and introducing just this reading. What would we say if somebody asked, what are our common threads, right? What are some threads that could potentially be woven throughout all of our either approach to writing or the poems themselves? And conversely, obviously, what are our differences? What does it mean to be, what do you share when you end up meeting as a group of poets talking about your poetry together? Could somebody point to this and say, oh, this is from that group of folks right there?
I'll jump in. I think that there's no other place that I can go that we're gonna talk about the scariest stuff or the most honest stuff or the most technical stuff. So I don't walk into my job, I don't, go home to my husband. It's like, hey, so here's this really nuanced sort of sliver where there's no other space for that conversation. And if we don't create it, if we don't and it's so easy to be like, oh, I didn't have to come to the focal point tonight. I could just got the comfy blankets right there. But if you don't actively it's like exercise, I think. So if it weren't for that, it wouldn't happen, especially after pandemic. We met over Zoom, which is something remarkable because I got to see everybody's writing space. So I think for me, it's there's a degree of accountability. It's like graduate school. And they'll say the hardest things to hear. Like if a colleague was like, you really, like, I teach English, I teach high school English, and like, you taught that lesson poorly, I'd be like, Jesus Christ. But if one of these people were like, I didn't like that line, I'd be like, I trust you. So there's something, I don't know, just laying it bare.
I think we all also steal from each other in a way that I really respect. So I'm just adding that on top of it. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little butthurt when you stole the thing. I was like, God damn it. I was like, but then I was like, what? I was never gonna do that. What you did with that line, like I was never gonna go there. It like my poem. They look.
Which one?
Oh, I wrote a poem called "Baycat" that's like a definition poem of that word. I really struggled to find an actual legit definition of it, so I was like, I'll just make up my own for it. But I was trying to write about like all of the people and places and things that don't get covered in like historical documents, like all the things that get left out, right? Because they don't end up in the newspaper or whatever. And then we're just talking about this idea, and you turned it like post-apocalyptic. So like again, I was never gonna do it, but I like that stealing or whatever. So you could do like one of those crazy, what is it, Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? Like you could do one of those crazy maps with all the darts and all the pins.
Like a murder mystery investigation.
I think we're all very different, but I have to say, when I go into the Google Docs, I always know whose poem I'm reading before I see the name. Like, I think everybody has a very distinct voice, and I recognize it right. It's like your actual voice. Like 3 words in, I know exactly who I'm reading, which I think is kind of says something, right?
So when you're, I think something that's been valuable for me in this process, and by the way, I want to note the time, right? We usually only go an hour, so if you got to leave, it's not going to hurt our feelings, I promise. When you're looking at those poems from the others with an eye toward craft, with an eye toward assisting them in the improvement of the poem, what do you learn from those poems? What do you learn from the others in the group that you might not learn otherwise, right? Because, I mean, we could make jokes about like the structure of an MFA workshop all day long, but I mean, there's value in that in some way, right? But I guess I'm kind of asking, what do you learn about the process of writing and your poetry itself in looking to those other poems with that particular lens of craft? Go for it.
All right, so I think it's sort of what everyone's touching on is the fact that we're all substantially different as writers, but we all have our own thing, know what we're doing, but we also respect everyone else's thing. And so I think honestly that's better than if we were 5, 6, however many show up on any given time. If we were all very similar writers, that would probably be less valuable for most of us because you're just sort of verifying what the other person is doing. It's much better to have someone who isn't a writer like you are, but can still look and appreciate the work that you're doing and take it on that level, not try to make it into their own poem. So I think that's sort of what I try to do as well.
I was also going to say that like we're talking a lot of stank on MFA, but I think what's also very cool about this group is that there's not a lot of MFAs in here in a good way. Maybe I'm the one with the most like disdain about it because there's so much like learning and unlearning that you end up doing, right, or whatever, or I don't know, like rules and things like that that I at least tried to like discard pretty heavily. But also I was like not interested in anybody's feedback for a really long time. I was also not. I had like a bad taste in my mouth about literary communities in general, and jealousy and whatever. And I feel like I got some like therapy in here because I could like talk shit about like, see that motherfucker get that prize? And then it'd be like, yeah, Lizzie, I saw that. And you're like, okay, all right, I'm gonna stop talking about it now. You know, I could like just like get that out of my system, that like comparing kinds of crap. And then, but also do the, like, if I were going to write this specific poem this specific kind of way, like what would be the different tools that I had, and like looking at it a little bit more like craft in that way was super helpful because I did finally get to a point where I could like send poems out that I realized that nobody had seen yet, which felt like, you know, before that they all had to be like proofed by like 5 different people to tell me that they were okay. And then also still having people tell me that I didn't make sense. It's really rough. Like that, I just had like random famous poets be like, I think your brain's broken. You're like, cool, thank you so much, guys. So it took there was like some confidence boosting that happened for me in this school group. So.
Any bites from over there? Otherwise, I'm gonna start opening it up to these folks, see if they have any questions. So we're about 8:40. I wanted to see if anybody had any questions burning on your little hearts that you would like to pose for these lovely folks. You think about that. I'm gonna pose one more question then for anybody to kind of take a stab at, and then I'll close this up. So, and you have a mic, so thankfully it's going to be a question for you. You mentioned recently, you've mentioned a couple times that so many of your poems feel more ready for submission or publication once they've made their way across our desks. Which brought up the question that we kind of wrestled with a little bit when last we met, which is, how do you know when to actually listen to us? Right? Like, how do you know when to take the feedback that is given and receive it and actually use that to then further iterate the poem versus, you know what, all that nonsense that Steve was giving me about this poem, like, I appreciate his attempts, but I'm just not going to really incorporate that. I, as the poet, I'm going to be the one to move it forward. How do you know?
I mean, do you have the answer to that? Because I'm if you have the answer to that. I don't know. I don't know anything.
Maybe after a little more.
All I do is like, I feel like I walk through the world and it's hurting and I feel like I have this big open wound, and all I sometimes do is sit down and I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna talk about my wound, whether it was my mean brother or work, or this time my husband scared me, or I'm afraid for my kid, or I'm afraid to die. I don't have an MFA. I'm not fancy at all. All I do is like, I don't know, I guess I've got this big cloak over my wound, and sometimes I show it. And there's nobody else in my life that I show that secret wound to. Like these people who I don't really get to know you guys. Like, I don't know on Facebook. I don't know anything about your mothers. I don't know who first broke your hearts, but I do know you know the secretest stuff about me. And so I guess if I'm bringing the words to you, there's like a little language that you speak that nobody else does. Even the people that see me every day and know how to take my coffee. Y'all don't know how to take my coffee, but that's an important thing. But I don't know, you kind of, there's that secret language that there's somebody, and I'm really grateful because we made it work in this kind of ugly, bumpy way during COVID, I think. And then we managed on the outside of it. So that's not an answer other than I don't know anything. So I'm gonna pass to Steph. My heart says
That's an answer.
pass to Steph.
I don't know is an answer.
Yeah, I don't know.
Wait, it was how do we know when to say like no?
I
I
listen to
I always listen to you guys.
So where's the line between actually taking that recommendation for an edit and implementing it versus saying, you know what, I appreciate that, but I'm not actually going to use it. I'm not going to take it into effect.
Sometimes you guys contradict each other, then it makes it really hard. Who do I pick? Who is right? Then I guess it's a coin flip, right?
Any like copy edit from Steph though, I'm gonna do that.
Yeah.
Because I know that she knows her shit.
Because I'm a pinhead about that stuff.
Treasure trove, yeah. Grammatical facts, yeah.
This needs an M dash. They were both, yeah.
Isn't
Not
it
an
a
M
lot,
dash, an M dash.
Like you'll correct words that I've made up. You'll go, well, if this is the way that you're gonna write this word, then it's gonna you're gonna need a house over here. And I'm like, thank you. Otherwise I look stupid.
isn't it a lot like beauty in a sense that it's, you can't really describe it, but you know it when you see it?
That's, yes, to be a little more crass, that's when we were getting together, that's the Supreme Court's definition of porn is I can't define it, but I know it when I see it, right? I don't know the poem is done, except when I see that it's done, and I know it, I can feel it, it's done.
Feel the
right?
click,
Yeah.
click.
Cool. Well, please begin our closing for this evening by helping me appreciate these poets for coming. Big thanks to you all for coming out this evening. Again, thank you to the Focal Point. I want to tell you that January 28th, I believe, is the next date for this particular reading. We will have two familiar faces to this particular community, Paul Strobel, who we had to reschedule from last year. He had a family emergency, as well as Dwight Bidikofer. I still have slots available for all next year, so please do contact me, poetry.point@stlouispoetrycenter.org. We also have books for sale in the back at yonder corner, so please visit these poets and please give them your money and enjoy their books. Any other announcements I need to make? Erin Quick, would you like to say a few words as we close, or is there anything else I need to mention to these lovely people?
I don't think there's anything else to mention. I just want to say it's really good to see everybody. This has been we've had some technical difficulties, but thank you all for coming out tonight. It really has been just, I mean,
There's more bourbon.
yes. And thank you to you guys. I feel like, oh, I love you all.
You can sign up to donate to Poetry Center for $5 a month.
Yes.
True.
It's very
Yeah,
it's
we
very
have
cush, and then you can submit to the contest.
This is true. Yes, we do run an annual contest, the national contest. So yes.
PayPal just takes it out. You don't even know it's happening.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.